Our next speaker is Nils Anden, who is CEO of Kindred Group, the online market leader in the Netherlands. Instead of delivering a traditional speech, Nils has opted for a more informal format, namely the mid-morning chat. This is why I'm also welcoming Peter Paul de Goeij, Managing Director of the Netherlands Gambling Association, NOGA, to the stage, who will engage Nils in, I'm sure, a highly interesting conversation. Nils, Peter Paul, please join us to the stage, and thank you very much for coming. Peter Paul. Nils, welcome. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. I was asked by an old colleague of mine to do an introduction in Dutch, and I practiced last night, but I have decided not to do it, so sorry about that.
I was just going to say, welkom till Nederlanden, no?
Yeah, dank wel.
That's as far as my Swedish goes this morning. Welcome, Nils Anden. For those of the people in the audience that don't know you, can you maybe give a very brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Nils Anden. I am Swedish originally. I've been living in London since 2006, though, with the recent move to Malta, so not particularly Swedish perhaps anymore. I've been with Kindred on and off since 2006. I left for a couple of years, but came back and have been CEO since last spring.
Last spring, yeah. So, and just diving straight in, is this your first visit to the Netherlands, or?
No, I've been in Amsterdam a lot of times and a lot around the country. So I love coming here, though. It's a beautiful country.
Thank you. So, thinking back to what René just told us, how do you reflect on the player focus that René was calling for, also in relation to, let's say, the issue of the duty of care?
No, I think it's imperative that the industry as a whole, but I think not just the industry, but the surrounding stakeholders around this industry work together on this, right? We have a lot of experience, not only in Netherlands, of course, but across Europe, and I think we've seen incidences where it works really well, where the industry, the regulator, ultimately also the policymakers, but also other stakeholders get involved in forming and informing a fact-based dialogue about the right outcomes for this industry. So you also need treatment centers, you need people with lived experiences. But again, I think it's the right word. It is around the consumers of these products where we have to start and form a sensible, sustainable regulatory framework. And I usually try to frame this in the points of, as an industry, what we should be competing on is ultimately the customer experience. We should not be competing in terms of duty of care or in terms of deposit limits. These should be the framework, the guardrails that we work within. And then it's up to us as operator to provide the best customer experience across all touch points when it comes to responsible gambling, but also when it comes to the actual experience on site. And that's where we as an industry should be focusing. But that requires a strong, sustainable framework to work within as well.
So, and when you're talking about the duty of care, you also are thinking about the markers of harm and the European program?
Yeah, I think that is a very good development, because it comes back to these questions and ensuring that we have a fact-based dialogue. And I'm really looking forward to actually having a sense standard across the European Union around markers of harm. And ultimately, what I hope the outcome of that will be is that they can be codified into the regulatory framework across markets in Europe, which means that we have the same framework to work within, irrespective of who the operator is. It's clear what the expectations are on the companies in this industry, but also for the consumers. They know that they are being looked after at the end of the day.
So coming to the Netherlands must be special to you because Unibet is currently market leader in the Netherlands. How did that happen? How did you manage to do that?
Yeah, I mean, luck, of course. No, I think it's. We're of course super pleased with our position in the market, and we want to retain that position. But I think it comes back to the fact that our core focus as a company is really on customer experience, and the consumer's experience with us should be a local one, but it also should be tailored to their needs. And I mean, that is something that we worked very hard on as a company. And I think, if you look at Netherlands in particular, we made sure we have a very localized offer, both in terms of gaming, but also in terms of sports betting. But then it's also the wider experience in terms of how you deposit, withdraw money, how your interaction is with us across all touch points of the site. So I think that has been one of the key highlights for us in Netherlands, but also, taking responsibility. I mean, I don't think that's something that always should be pushed on operators from the regulator side. It's something that we can actually do ourselves. And we've launched Unibet Impact here in Netherlands and in other markets that we're very proud of, and other CSR programs. And ultimately also our Journey Towards Zero initiative that is all about ultimately a fact-based, transparent dialogue around the issues in this industry and how you can protect consumers from harm.
Can you tell a little bit more about the Road to Zero, what it entails for those of us who don't know it?
No, so ultimately we were, I think, the first operator to actually report the amount of revenue that we see in our total revenue base that comes from high-risk gamblers. And that's something we've been doing for, I think, 5 years now. We were hoping, maybe expecting that this was something that more operators across the industry would adopt. For us, it's been a very good initiative to kind of both ensure the whole organization is focused on this. I mean, it's in no one's interest, neither from the company perspective, but nor from a market perspective, to continue to serve or create harmful or risky behavior. It doesn't set us up for success in a sustainable and a long-term fashion, which I think ultimately is a key requirement for any operator in this industry. It's very competitive, and it's easy to get stuck in very short-term ambitions. But if you think around what's happened in pretty much every European market, is that those behaviors have driven negative policy development almost everywhere. So I think it's incumbent, and that's also one of the key reasons why we initiated Journey Towards Zero, is to ensure that also we as a company have something that we track, monitor, and ultimately also have as a core KPI for all individuals inside Kindred to hit the decreasing amount of revenue from high-risk players.
Yeah. So, what's the number one priority? What's important for Kindred in the coming period when you're looking at the Dutch market? What's the number one worry or?
Yeah, I think for us, as in many other markets across Europe, it is of course striking the balance between consumer protection and ensuring that you have a competitive regulated market. Yeah. I mean, it is fundamentally true that if we put too much regulatory burden on any market, channelization will go down. And I think it's super important to keep that in mind when we have a fact-based debate on true customer protection, is those 10% that will not, or 15%, or in some of the markets, it's gone up to maybe 30% of the market not gambling within the regulated environment, their consumer protection is zero. We know that. We know how some of these offshore operators operate. It's abundantly clear. So I think that balance, not only for Netherlands, but across Europe, I think is the key priority for us to work with industry associations, trade associations, but also regulator and policymakers, continue having a good fact-based dialogue on how do you create a truly sustainable regulated environment that retains high channelization, but has very strong levels of consumer protection.
When you look at the balancing act and not putting too many locks on the door, as I always say, because a player easily goes to the next door, which might be an illegal operator, then taking a view of the 7.3% tax added to the already high tax rate. So what do you think the impact will be?
No, I think it's clear. I mean, we've seen it in other markets. I think it's at the end of the day, it will lead to a kind of slightly decreased consumer experience. I mean, some of these increases in taxation will have to be passed on to the consumer, which will lead to a slightly less attractive regulated environment, which in turn has the risk of driving consumers to the unregulated environment. Because as you say, it is true, they're one click away and will always be. I think it's extremely hard to get channelization rates to 100%, but 90+% should always be the ambition.
Yeah. So, and they are trying to raise 202 million euros additional for the state budget. If you're driving customers away from the regulated market, you'll never have an incremental, you will not have an uptake, but you will probably have a lower income from tax. But what will this mean for the payback rates, for instance, that you can offer?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too early to say, and I think it will differ a lot between different operators. But I think your first point there is very valid. I think a pure calculation that an increased tax rate has no impact on the overall market and it's just basically a net positive for the state, I think is a little bit too maybe myopic view on that. I think we've seen a similar tax increase in Sweden. And I think it was the Copenhagen Economics Forum that did a calculation on that and said basically the state had miscalculated by a factor of sort of around 60 million euro because the impact of the tax decrease will ultimately make the market smaller.
Yeah, I think they even calculated that it will lead to more problem gambling in a way.
Well, that will be the effect. I mean, the more people you drive outside of the regulated environment, the higher the probability of problem gambling, I would say.
Yeah. So, also wrapping this up, what is your main ambition for the Netherlands in the coming years?
So I think two ambitions for us around Netherlands. I think one, which I think is the most important objective if you think long term, is to support in the development of a continued sustainable regulated market. I mean, through the trade associations, but also directly, we want to support a really strong fact-based debate around how do we ensure that what I think to date has been a fairly successful regulation of the Dutch market continues to be a successful regulatory framework that balances these two needs of consumer protection, but ultimately ensuring that channelization remains high. And then, of course, we want to continue to be the market leader in Netherlands and continue to give our consumers a fantastic experience. But I think the second part is incumbent on the first part.
Yeah. So, and if we can leave the room with, let's say, a key message or maybe a hope that you would like to convey for this.
Yeah, I think the Netherlands is a super exciting market, and I think it is going through change from a policy and from a regulatory perspective. But I think it is a battleground is a little bit too strong of a word, but I think it is a little bit of a litmus test for the industry to really showcase how we can show regulators and policymakers the information we have, all the data points we have, not only in Netherlands, but also across Europe, how a well-functioning, regulated gambling market can look like, and really convey that and ensure that policymakers truly understand that. I think that is a fantastic challenge for everyone in this room to kind of really come together around.
Thanks very much for that.
Thank you.